think it needs to be broken. I mean, I think it needs to be refigured, and we have to acknowledge that a lot of these things that we're looking at were written a really long time ago, and since then people have been writing still. So we need to, break it and then recreate it, and acknowledge the differences that there are. I think it'll be hard. I think it'll take a really long time. I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but I certainly hope so. But I think we need to be willing to accept change, and I think that's hard for people, because the things that we see, like the canon, it's a dominant canon. It's something that's seen as legitimate and valuable, and everything else isn't. It's the difference between literature and just popular novels. So we need to be able to relook at those things, I think.
To go off what Miriam was saying, I'd have to agree that the canon itself, the idea of a standard body of literature, whether it expands to include other things or not, just the sense that it exists, that there is a standard body of this is what you should be looking at, these are the artifacts which are judged to be important, is a problem in itself. So when he said that it should be broken, I would have to agree with that, in the sense that whatever the standard's going to be, it's always, okay, so now it includes some other voices, but then there's still voices not included, so it's always this sort of sphere of privilege that it sort of entails, and so even the notion of a canon in general, to me, seems problematic.
I think right now where we're at is that these other stories or these other voices are only suitable for limited attention, and so I think the poet Martínez Espada says that if the canon doesn't open, it'll fossilize. I think that's certainly true.
I'm glad Miriam said something about my lifetime or our lifetime, and something that I was talking about with actually Juan earlier is that as my generation is getting older, sometimes I forget about the one coming up after me and us. And something that happened to me a couple of years ago that made me feel a little optimistic, and usually I'm pretty cynical, but something that made me optimistic is I went with a friend who was a theater arts major and who wanted to attend a children's play, and it was a production of Sleeping Beauty as a musical for kids, but it was really nice and amazing effects and stuff. But it charged a lot even for a matinee place, and he happened to have tickets. I went along with him, and all these mostly girls came along in these almost like little prom dresses and stoles, and it's very interesting sociologically. But so we're watching, and the lights go down, and there's all these great lights, and the woman playing Sleeping Beauty was Asian American. And I was so shocked, and I turned around to look to see if people were gasping, and they weren't. And all the girls were clapping and excited, and afterwards they were all saying let's go take a picture with Sleeping Beauty, and she was out in the lobby, and it was kind of this amazing thing to me. I was like, that would have never happened in my childhood, ever. So I feel like if in some of our media these kinds of changes are taking place. It's a small symbolic thing, and it's still a very particular story of a princess, but it gave me some.
And I think sometimes, we're talking about our responsibilities, but I think we also have to sort of be critical of white writers. And so one thing that I always hear, when I go see a writer of color, is they're always asking, so how does being Mexican figure into your writing? But we never ask that of white writers. We never say so how does your whiteness come into play when you're writing? So I think we also have to be critical of whiteness in our literature. Yeah.
Back to the audience. Anybody have anything to add or have any question for our panel? Dr. Warren,
I don't know really how to put it, because just last night we were in a world drama class, and of course trying to read vast numbers of different. What do you think about the globalization of the canon? What are your takes personally as writers who are writing out of your experience? How do you see that as potentiality or value or not?
Well, and I was referring earlier to Said's essay, The Politics of Knowledge, and I think that's something that he's sort of pushing towards, to place literature in a global setting, and to be able to sort of look at literature and artistic genius as all being a part of the world. And I think that we do have an effect on, or what we're writing is part of the world, and it is affecting the rest of the world. And we should sort of also be aware of what's going on in other world, in other countries, and because we live in a political world where our sort of actions have an impact on other countries. So, I mean, some of the things that I think the video was referring to is, she acknowledges that she's also sort of fallen into this single story when she went to Mexico, and so I think, and literature informs us about other things that are going on. So I think that I've sort of learned a lot about Latin America through reading Latin American literature. Learned about sort of what our actions in the States, sort of how they've impacted other people in Latin America. But I think right now what's odd is that like the New Yorker is publishing a lot of stories about writers writing about other countries that are living here, or so I don't know. I think it's a trend that's happening. I think right now, but sometimes I don't know. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
Yeah, I do, unless somebody else. I think from the 2 panels ago, they were talking about the gaze and the male gaze and the white gaze, and something that I think has been beneficial from globalization of the canon, if I'm understanding that term correctly, is that I'm able to see like the different ways that the gaze works on different groups or countries, and I know part of that trend has been a lot of South Asian writers, Shumpo Lahiri and so on and so forth. But something I like from reading their stories is, even though I'm not South Asian, I can kind of compare notes about how British colonialism has affected a country and what that does. So, I get another angle on the same gaze that's going on.
I feel like there's a reason why Chimamanda Adichie said, that she didn't have this notion of American men from reading American Psycho, is because I mean this novel is part of kind of this like a global canon, and I think that if we did have a global canon that included a lot more of the world, then we would have similar reactions to reading literature that comes from outside of the Western world too.
Yeah, I think when I went with the New Yorker is that I got my thought together. Is that what the New Yorker seems to be doing recently is publishing voices that are writing stories about other countries but are living in the U.S. So, but they're not sort of bringing those voices from other countries, except for the exception of Bolaños, recently in the New Yorker. But a lot of those writers are writing, Yiyan Li writes about China even though she lives in Oakland, or, so we are getting these sort of chosen and limited voices from other countries, or writers from here writing about other countries.
One of the things that I thought about when she was talking about the fact that she had gotten a lot of different American stories, I also had to wonder what kind of American story she was getting. Because one of the things that I've noticed, even living here in America, that I don't get a lot of multicultural stories in American literature. And I think we have to be really careful when we create any sort of standard canon, even a global one, because there's still a possibility of silencing other voices. The fact that Chicana literature, usually means Sandra Cisneros, but there are other ones too that we don't hear, and it's almost like there's, like someone decides, we'll open the gate for this one, and then we'll close it off for everybody else. And so that would be my fear of, any kind of canon. I'm definitely, I want us to have a global one too, I want us to have, but I also want us to be careful with how we define that and who we allow into that, because I think that there is the possibility that we also create a power hierarchy within that too. Which stories are we going to listen to? So
It becomes that